As we take a look at Unit 2 of Economics, we're going to start out with Chapter 4, and we're going to talk about the concept of demand. As we look at demand, kind of two things. One, we like to use graphs, pictures, things like that to help explain some concepts, provide a visual which will give students a better handle on something. So as we take a look, we have a simple graph here, and we have quantity on the horizontal axis, the axis running right to left, and we have price of that specific item on the vertical axis, running up and down. If we take a particular product like, let's say, cheeseburgers, and if we're looking at cheeseburgers, we may ask the students, who is interested in finding an alternative to school lunch? And if Mr. Clement was selling cheeseburgers, how many of you would be interested in that? And you get various questions about, what kind of cheeseburgers are they? What percent of beef are they? Things like that. You're going to have some students who, no matter what the price is, they're not going to want cheeseburgers. Maybe they don't eat beef. Maybe that's not something that they choose to purchase. So as you look at price, you may have some students that say, I don't care how cheap you make this product, I don't want it. You may have some people who just love cheeseburgers, not all that fired up about school lunch, and you could charge whatever you wanted, and they would still buy that cheeseburger. So you kind of have both ends of the spectrum. We kind of ignore those for now, and we just talk in general terms. I'll ask a class of 30, how many of you as an alternative would buy cheeseburgers? And usually it works to throw out a price. So we'll start out with $2 per cheeseburger. And we ask class 30, how many of you would have purchased a cheeseburger at $2 a piece? And for our example here, we'll say there's 18 of them. Okay, so we'll go ahead and plot a point, again matching up our price on the vertical axis with the quantity on the horizontal axis. And we'll place a dot there saying, in our market, our particular market for cheeseburgers, our captive audience of 30 students, they would buy 18. So then we say, well, what if Mr. Clement decided that we wanted to sell it at a cheaper price? How many of you would say, well, what if we charged $1 for cheeseburgers? How many of you would buy that cheeseburger now at $1 per unit? More often than not, again, you're not going to get everybody, but you may get more students. You may get a few more that say, yep, I'll go ahead and buy that cheeseburger. And in our example here, price goes down to $1. We'll have 24 cheeseburgers purchased. And then we hit the other spectrum of, well, what if Mr. Clem needs to make money and we're going to charge $3 per cheeseburger? We may have less students that are willing to purchase that cheeseburger at $3. Their alternative may be better. We talk about the idea of marginal benefit versus marginal cost. Now, everybody who chooses to eat food has some benefit from eating that food. Okay? There's a cost for it. If you want to buy that cheeseburger at $2 per, what is your perceived value? What do you see as the value to you for that transaction? Okay? And if the benefit is greater than the cost, then you'll go ahead and purchase that transaction. If the cost is greater than the benefit, then more often than not, you probably won't make that transaction. You won't purchase that cheeseburger. When it's all said and done, if we kind of clean up our points, what we're going to end up with is a downward sloping curve. It's going to look something like that. And we're going to call that a demand curve, often abbreviated with the letter D. We will come back to this graphic and look at it often as we get into our discussion of demand. As we continue with demand, we look at demand as the desire and the ability and the willingness to purchase a product. It can't just be desire and willingness. If you don't have the ability to purchase it, then that transaction is not going to happen. You may want the cheeseburger. You may be hungry and want the cheeseburger. You may have the willingness to buy the cheeseburger, but if you don't have the money in your pocket to purchase that cheeseburger at whatever the price is, $2, $3, $1. That doesn't happen. The transaction doesn't happen in the market if you don't have all three: desire, ability, and willingness. As we move on, we're going to talk about economics in the term of microeconomics. Again, microeconomics is study of consumer behavior and decisions dealing with small units. Okay, we're not talking about every single citizen, all 317 million people in the U.S. We're talking about we have a handful of people. We're looking at a particular product. It's smaller type units. As we move on to the concept of demand, and we talk about the law of demand. Okay, law of demand is going to have an inverse relationship with its price. If we take a look at our graph back here, you'll notice that as price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. As the price goes up, we'll notice that the quantity demanded goes down. So it is an inverse or an opposite relationship. Price goes down, we want more. Price goes up, we want less. Next two terms we're going to deal with are marginal utility and the idea of diminishing marginal utility. If we start out with marginal utility, we can kind of break that in half, and we say that marginal means more. Utility means benefit. So when we take a look at the concept of marginal utility, it is the extra satisfaction, okay, the more satisfaction or usefulness that a certain person gets out of one more unit of a product. And we'll come back to another food item, maybe talk about pizza. The concept of diminishing marginal utility is after a while that extra satisfaction from the next product diminishes, or it is less satisfying. So rather than cheeseburgers, it's a little easier to make pizza. So Mr. Clem says, being the enterprising person I am, let's go ahead and come up with some New York style large pieces of pizza. And we're gonna compete with the school lunch program. So we decide that we're gonna start charging $2 for a piece of pizza. And big old honking slice of pizza. So we go ahead and we create our pizzas, and we go ahead and start selling them to our students. And you pick a particular student. Tom comes up, and Tom opens up his wallet. And Tom has a scarce resource, and that'd be money. Tom doesn't have an infinite amount of money to be able to purchase whatever he wants. So he has to make decisions. Now, if Tom had all the money he wanted, he could just kind of pick and choose and do whatever he wanted, buy whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted to do so. That's not the case. Tom's got maybe $5 in his wallet. So Tom looks, and he can go to the cash line and get an ice cream cone or get a nacho or a bowl of soup or something like that, or Mr. Clemens selling pizzas. Big old honking slice of New York style pizza, and it's $2 each. Tom, being the hungry guy he is, he comes out, he takes that $2, he goes ahead and he purchases that piece of pizza, sits down, and he just destroys it. It's not even funny. He's starving, and he just demolishes that piece of pizza. Tom now has a question. He's still got $3 left in his wallet. He goes and he makes a decision. How much more satisfaction is he going to get out of that next piece of pizza? Marginal utility. Maybe he takes that $2 and buys a second piece of pizza. Okay. If we go back and say maybe Tom's got $20 in his wallet, okay, all in ones. So he can come up and he can buy that first piece of pizza at $2. He can look at buying that second piece of pizza at another $2. And maybe he buys that third piece of pizza at another $2. At some point in time, Tom is going to become full. At some point in time, he walks up, he grabs that piece of pizza, he sits down, he eats it. He reaches into his wallet and he looks at that $2 and he pulls that $2 out of his wallet, and he's got a decision to make. Is that next piece of pizza worth the $2 that he has in his hand? Are there other options? Okay, marginal benefit compared to marginal cost. Could he go ahead and say, I'd rather take this $2 and go buy a pop or an ice cream or a bowl of soup, or I'd rather just save those $2? Okay. As you take a look, more often than not, the additional benefit or the marginal utility will diminish on a product depending on how you choose to consume it. If we look at air fresheners, and let's say air fresheners are $1 each, okay? I perceive a certain amount of benefit for buying an air freshener because my kids make a mess in my truck, or I've had the dog in the back of the truck after hunting and the back of the truck just stinks. Okay, so I look at it and say, well, one air freshener for $1, that's a good deal. Maybe it really stinks and I decide that I got to buy 2. Okay, but at some point in time, that extra usefulness out of that air freshener diminishes. It doesn't matter whether they're $1 a piece. I'm going to stop purchasing them. I'm going to say that dollar can be better spent somewhere else.